La a'budu ma ta'budun. I shall worship not that which you worship. This verse addresses the pundits among the disbelievers of the Quraysh and answers their proposal of striking a mutual compromise. In other words, their hopes have been shattered to pieces in the very first sentence. Generally, people have taken la a'budu in the present tense. Zamakhshri is of the view that this is against the linguistic principles of Arabic, and I agree with him. When the particle la is appended to a verb in the continuous tense or mudhari in this manner, it necessarily transforms its meaning into the future tense. If a verb in the continuous tense is to be taken in the present tense, then the particle of negation which is appropriate is ma instead of la. Moreover, negating or affirming something in the present tense has not much use. Everyone among the Quraysh knew that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ does not worship any of their idols. In such a situation, what use was there to tell them that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ does not worship what they worship? Their basic objective of presenting the compromise formula was that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ should show some lenience in his attitude in which there was no possibility of the existence of other deities. If anything could have shattered their hopes, it had to be the emphatic statement that in the future too he would not show any lenience in the matter of monotheism. We have written in the tafsir of the verse, وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا فَيُدْهِنُونَ, or they desire that you be flexible, then they will also be flexible, Surah number 68, verse 9, that after going to the extent of persecution and oppression of the Muslims, it has been explained in the tafsir of verse 9 of Surah Qalam that after going to the extent of persecution and oppression of the Muslims, the Quraysh had got a fair idea just before migration that they would not be able to stop the ever-increasing force of Islam. The only option left was to pressurize the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and force him to settle affairs on the principle of give and take. This meant that just as they accept a position for the Almighty, the Prophet should also accept a position for their idols, and this compromise would end the dispute. They were hopeful that by pressurizing the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they would make him accept their stance. Thus, they exercised all their power to achieve this goal, and the situation reached the extent that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his companions were forced to migrate. Since monotheism is the foundation of Islam, going through the trial of migration was tolerated. However, no flexibility was tolerated in the belief of monotheism, and it was openly declared, La a'budu ma ta'budun, or I shall worship not that which you worship. Wala antum a'abiduna ma a'bud, nor will you ever worship that which I worship. At the same time, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also informed his opponents of the bare fact that if they think that they worship or will become the worshippers of the God he worships, then this is a mere thought on their part. The basic condition of serving and worshipping God is that only he be served and worshipped, and no one else should have any position in this regard. If they are not willing to give up their deities, they cannot become his worshippers. It is their misconception that they regard themselves to be worshippers of the Almighty. Worshipping other deities besides God cannot be tolerated. If they are to serve him, then it is essential that they leave serving others. If they combine their worship with his worship, they would definitely be regarded as worshippers of these deities. However, they will have no share in worshipping the Almighty. The expression ma ta'budun used in the previous verse is absolutely appropriate for the deities of the idolaters because they worshipped imaginary and made-up deities. However, a question does arise about the expression ma a'budu used for the Almighty. The answer to this question is that it is used thus on the principle of mujanasa, which is very common in the Arabic language and in the Qur'an. For example, dinnahum kama danu, or we dealt with them the way they dealt with us, and jaza'u sayyi'atin sayyi'atun mithluha, or the recompense of evil is similar evil, Surah number 42, verse 40. We have already elaborated on this style earlier. وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدْتُمْ, nor did I worship that which you worshipped. The previous declaration related to the future. Here in this verse, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has unequivocally stated that in the past also he never worshipped what the idolaters worshipped. Zamakhshri has also interpreted this verse in this manner. I find it to be correct, both linguistically and with respect to the context of the verse. The sentence, وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ, is a noun sentence and therefore does not have a tense. In other words, it is not in the past or present or future tense, and is in fact in its absolute form and can be related to any of these tenses in the presence of some indication. Here, since ma'abattum is in the past tense, hence on the basis of this explicit indication, the negation in wala ana abidun also relates to the past. The meaning being, in the past also I did not worship what you worshipped. This sentence increases the intensity of the declaration of acquittal made in the previous verse. The implication would be that when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not even consider worshipping the deities of the idolaters even before he was blessed with prophethood and with the radiance of divine revelation, how can he now go astray by worshipping them when he is directly receiving guidance from God? In other words, if there had been even a single period in his life in which he subscribed to polytheism, they could expect that he may get convinced to adopt it again. But when even in the age of Jahiliyyah he was not contaminated with the filth of polytheism, how can they now expect this from him? وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ. Nor did you ever worship that which I have been worshipping. This verse has the same words as verse 3 and thus seems a repetition. However, it has a different meaning. Like verse 4, it relates to the past, whereas, as explained earlier, verse 3 is related to the future. In other words, the leaders of the Quraysh are informed that if they are under the misconception that in the past also they have been worshipping the God whom the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has been worshipping, then this is an absolutely false notion. As has been explained earlier, worshipping God whilst associating partners with Him is like not worshipping Him, and these leaders have never ever given up worshipping other deities besides God. Hence, neither does the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ belongs to their religious fraternity, nor do they belong to his religious fraternity. So how do they expect that they would be able to make the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ join their religious fraternity whilst being contaminated with the filth of polytheism? An obvious question which arises on our interpretation of the verse is that why have the words ma a'budu been used instead of ma abattu? One answer to this is given by Zamakhshri, that the words ma'abattu have not been said because in that period the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not worship God, so he did not give its reference but only referred to his present. However, this answer is absolutely wrong. Prophets of God are sound embodiments of human nature even before they are assigned prophethood, and since monotheism is the religion of human nature, they are never incriminated with polytheism, which is against human nature. Moreover, they always worship the Almighty in some form or another, even though they might have exercised their own opinion in determining this form or deduced it from the previously existing tradition of religion. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to worship God before being given the responsibility of prophethood, although we do not have a clear picture of the form in which he worshipped him. However, what is known is that it was based on the Hanifiyyat, whose tradition continued to exist in the Arabian society ever since the times of the prophets Abraham and Ishmael ﷺ. Thus, in our opinion, the reason cited by Zamakhshri for not saying ma'abattu is not correct. The correct reason for this is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not worship the Almighty merely in the past. The fact of the matter is that just as he worshipped the Almighty in the past, he adhered to worshipping Him in the present also. The words ma'arbudu actually express in the past continuous tense the continuity of his worship extending from the past to the present. The implication is that his adversaries did not worship in the past the God who was worshipped by him not only in the past but also in the present. Lakum deenukum waliya deen. To you your religion and to me mine. The implication of this verse is that when there was no commonality between the religion of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in the past nor in the present, how do they expect that all of them will agree on one opinion? Hence, there is no use expecting a compromise. To the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ belongs his religion, and to them theirs. He will work according to his way, and they should according to theirs, and wait whether the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is proven correct or they. A similar declaration is made in the following verse: قُلْ يَا قَوْمِ اعْمَلُوا عَلَى مَكَانَتِكُمْ إِنِّي عَامِلٌ. Or, tell them, O people, do what you are at your places, and I will do what I am at my place. Surah number 6, verse 135. In the 93rd verse of Surah Hud and the 39th verse of Surah Zumar also, this declaration is cited with reference to some other messengers, and the objective is to close the doors to the discussion and debate initiated by the enemies of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to convince him to accept their views. With this declaration, he gave them his final verdict, that neither is he willing to shift from his religion in the slightest way, nor is he willing to accept in any way their religion. Generally, people have regarded this verse to be an expression of tolerance. However, this verse actually expresses disgust at the attitude of the disbelievers, and in fact is an expression of permanent severing of ties from them and a declaration of war. In short, this is the same declaration which Abraham ﷺ made before his followers, which the Qur'an has mentioned thus: قَدْ كَانَتْ لَكُمْ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ فِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ إِذْ قَالُوا لِقَوْمِهِمْ إِنَّا بُرَآءُ مِنْكُمْ وَمِمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ كَفَرْنَا بِكُمْ وَبَدَا بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمُ الْعَدَاوَةُ وَالْبَغْضَاءُ أَبَدًا حَتَّى تُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَحْدَهُ. You have the best example in Abraham and those who followed him. Remember when they said to their people, "We disown you and the idols which you worship besides God. We renounce you, and enmity and hate shall reign between us until you believe in the one and only God." Surah number 60, verse 4. The example of Abraham ﷺ and his followers has only been presented before the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ so that he and his followers too make such a declaration of renunciation from their people. Thus it was whilst following this example that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ made this declaration. So how can tolerance be construed from it? If the context and sequence of a discourse is not kept in consideration, a great inadequacy that results is that people fail to differentiate between words of disgust and words of tolerance. This is a very good example of this failure. With the blessings of God, on these words ends the commentary of this surah. وَآخِرُ دَعْوَانَا أَنِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Or, and our last words are that all gratitude is for God. Lahore, 24th June 1980 AD, 10th Sha'ban 1400 AH.